Good day to all our listeners around the world, and welcome to another episode of Unveil the Future Season 3. I'm Tiến Thành, Marketing and Communications Specialist at the VinFuture Foundation, and I'm delighted to be your host today. Originating from Vietnam, the VinFuture Prize honors scientific breakthroughs that create a better future for humanity. Nominations for the 2026 VinFuture Prize season are now open. Please scan the QR code here for more details. And without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce you to our special guest today, Professor Youba Sokona, Vice Chair of the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, IPCC, and Special Advisor for Sustainable Development at the South Centre. With over 35 years of expertise in energy, environment, and sustainable development in Africa, Professor Sokona is recognized as a leading global voice in climate policies. He has previously served as co-chair of IPCC Working Group 3 on climate change mitigations and held key leadership positions such as Executive Secretary of the Sahara and Sahel Observatory and coordinator of the African Climate Policy Center. Throughout his career, Professor Sokona has combined deep technical expertise with visionary policy leadership, championing sustainable growth, equitable transitions, and African-led innovation in the global response to climate change. Today, he joins us to discuss how developing nations can play a defining role in shaping a sustainable and inclusive future, and how science can continue to serve humanity in the fight against climate change. Professor Youba Sokona, it's a true pleasure to have you with us today. Your decades of work have made you one of Africa's most respected and influential voices on climate change and sustainable development. To begin our conversations, I'd love to take you back to the very start of that journey. What first inspired you to dedicate your life's work to addressing such urgent global challenges?
So back to the 80s, 70s, toward the end of the 70s, being an engineer, and I have been confronted with one of devastating drought in Sahel. And this is the drought in Sahel that has created drought and deserted land degradation. And then confronted with the many population was confronted with the problem of water and energy. And I feel with a number of colleagues that we need to do something about it. And then as an engineer, we start working in the field and how to bring water and then to the people and then to also the animals in the region. And at the same time, people were confronted with the problem of energy, particularly for cooking, and then how to help people to solve those issues. And that was my first motivation and then to start working. That was at the same time of what we call in at that time, appropriate technology, thinking that technology will help solving problems, particularly in the rural communities. And so I learned that to tackle development issues, fundamentally, you have to tackle the energy issue. Because without energy, you cannot do anything. And energy is a basis of accessing to all other services. If you have energy, you have water. But without energy, you cannot do anything. And then that was my motivation and to look at. And then I learned how to go beyond the technological aspect and to look at the socioeconomic element and the aspect. So I integrate a number of research organizations on energy for development. And that allowed me also to travel across the world, including going to Vietnam, and then to learn from what happened there in the rural area, in the rural communities, and particularly on the rural sector. And from that, we initiated training of people how to manage energy issues. And this is a bit some of my motivation, how to solve problems, particularly to have a better living condition for the people. And this is still my motivation.
Thank you for sharing that journey, Professor Sokona. It's inspiring to hear how witnessing the Sahel drought and working directly with communities on water and energy access shaped your lifelong dedication to sustainable development. Your story beautifully shows how science can serve humanity at its most fundamental level. Looking back to those early years, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced and what kept you motivated to keep going despite them?
One of the major problems we are facing in many of developing countries, the global south, and particularly in the poor countries, this is access to information, access to technology, access to knowledge. And then to be able also, and then to link the policymakers and the practice. And sometimes because of the system in which and then we grown with, and that is bilateral and then multilateral that decide what is good for our countries and what is not good for our countries. Most of the time, they are the ones who decide. And then to also get people concentrating on what matters. And sometimes this is challenging. And sometimes because of limited expertise at that period, because when I started 70 back to the 70s, there were very limited expertise. And this is why we initiated the energy planning training courses for African. That was back to 85. Unless we have a critical mass of people who understand the linkages between energy and development, energy as a means of development, it wouldn't be easy and then to move forward the ambition we had in mind.
That really highlights how vital access to knowledge, technology, and local expertise is in driving real and lasting change. Building on that, over the decades, you've helped establish and lead major initiatives such as the African Renewable Energy Initiative and the African Climate Policy Center, both of which have made a profound impact on the continent's development. Among these efforts, which one do you feel best represent your vision for a sustainable and inclusive future for Africa?
And still, one of the challenging is look at demand coming from the policymakers in the continent, and then to have a close interrelationship and a close navigation with the policymakers, and then to make policy that is informed by our finding, our experiment. And this is still an issue. And then to have also robust and solid organizations in the continent working on those two different issues, energy and climate, and the interrelationship between the two, starting with the energy. And I had the opportunity and then to start back to the 80s and then to be part of a network called Cooperative Program on Energy and Development that made with think tanks from the global south, including in China, in India, Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, and so on. And then to look at energy as a means for development and then to do some research on that. And then from that, we discuss among ourselves, the African team, to see how best we can use the output of the findings. And then the best way would organize a training course and then to share lessons, experiences in order to better inform policies at different levels, including from the local to the national at the regional level.
It's clear from your experience that bridging research with policy making and building strong institutions to support that link has always been central to your work. Beyond these policies and advisory roles, you've also mentored many young scientists and decision makers. From your perspective, what are the greatest opportunities and challenges facing Africa's next generations of climate and energy leaders?
So obviously, one of the key challenges we are confronted in the African is access to finance, because you need resources, and then in order to be able to do that, the government have limited resources and they have other priorities, and then they do not consider, or they do not afford or do not consider research as, or knowledge production as important, very important. And also, our governments, I think that is the case also of Vietnam, have gone through what we call the structural adjustment programs back to the 80s and conducted by IMF and the World Bank. That means there is no need to invest in knowledge production because international expertise will provide that to the continent. So if you came through that process, and then how to mobilize adequate resources, and then to attract younger fellows, and then for them to learn, and then to be able also to be operational. And then this is not an easy task, and then confronted with limited resources, and then to have also solid and social organizations. Initiated different organizations at the universities and outside the universities. And we created a network of organizations working together on those different issues. And I was one of the bridge maker between those organizations, because there are two main languages spoken in Africa. This is French and English. I happen to be among them the only one who is a sort of bilingual. And so that I was a bridge maker between the Francophone country and the Anglophone country. And then so that increased my responsibility in order to, and from that also, when I set up the African Climate Policy Center, and then we created a program, a fellowship program. And that fellowship program was to attract the young African PhD. Every year, we recruit 15 of them working on the different aspects of climate, from the climate science and then to mitigation and adaptation, and then to train them, and then they have to produce papers. And then the objective was to have a critical mass within 5 years of very competent African fellows. And then this program started very well in the beginning because everything is related to funding. And then we end up to not have enough resources to be able to maintain those. And at that period, there were very few, philanthropic organizations that interested on those different issues. So those were some of the challenges, and when we launched recently the African Institute for Sustainable Energy and System Analysis, and then we learned from the COVID period that we do not need to be at the same location. So a huge amount of money, and then to run an organization, we can do it virtually as we are communicating. I am in Bamako in Mali, you are in Vietnam, and then we are communicating, and then we can do the same thing in Africa. And then so we explore that avenue, and then that helping us also to scale out what we initiated back in 20 or 30 years.
That's a truly inspiring point, Professor Sokona, especially as we think about how global corporations must include every region's voice and experience. The global conversations around the energy transitions often centers on developed countries, while Africa's perspective remain underrepresented. From your view, what unique contributions can Africa bring to the global transitions, and what risks do you see if African voices are not adequately heard?
I think that first of all, it is important to contextualize the narratives, because there is no single narrative. What is the narrative of energy transition in Vietnam cannot be applied in a country like Mali, because the current starting point are quite different. So it important and then to contextualize every issues. So we use the terminology or the word of transition, but in most of the African context, sometimes I have the tendency not using the word transition. I rather use the word of jump starting because we need to build our systems. We need to build our energy systems because it's not yet in place in the majority of the African countries. Where the transition is really needed at the global level, there's a limited interest on that. And I thought that was the case in Vietnam back to 20 years, cooking with firewood and charcoal. I suspect in large part of Vietnam, a parts of remote rural areas, no one is cooking with charcoal or firewood, mainly as a main cooking fuel. But this is unfortunately the case in the African continent. And that has a huge consequence on the health of the people, particularly the kids and the women. It has a huge impact on land degradation. It's a devastating impact on biodiversity. And then all those different elements as at the core of what needs to be done in the African context. If you are not contextualizing those different issues, hardly you can tackle them. But if we take the narrative of emerging economy of industrialized country, you miss completely and then to address the issue that matter to the people here in the continent. But when we said Africa is a diversity of situation, it is not a monolithic entity, the continent. There's diversity, and then there is some country where they do have infrastructure in place, such as South Africa, or country like mine in Mali, limited infrastructure. And between the two extremes, you have a wide variety of countries, and we need to look at all of them, but by contextualizing those different elements. And then starting from that, and then to produce knowledge that will inform policy, and then that will also support action in the ground.
That's a wonderful way to look ahead, Professor Sokona. So if we were to fast forward to 2035, what kind of future would you like to see for Africa in sustainable energy, climate resilience, and equitable development? And what role do you hope your work, the next generations of scientists and policymakers you've mentored, will play in bringing that vision to life?
I think that looking at how to include the well-being of the people, fundamental and critical in the African context, what will come to the man of people is widening the access of energy services. But when we said access to energy services, and then we have to go beyond the traditional way of approaching it. It has to go beyond the final energy and then to go to the useful energy, mean we integrate the end-use equipment. Because unless people have access to end-use equipment, bring electricity to a rural community, if they cannot afford fridge, if they cannot afford stoves, if they cannot afford any kind of machinery, the only thing they will end up is lighting, but lighting will not bring the well-being of the people. And then we have to look at those different, in which context. And in order to do so, you need to rethink the energy system, what can produce that, and then to deconstruct, and then the traditional way of approaching energy issues, electricity, particularly the centralized system. Because we have seen during the past 10 years a tremendous evolution of the renewable, particularly the solar. The costs are getting cheaper and cheaper. And then the storage system is making efficient and then much more cheaper. By the way, I do not get electricity from the grid. I have my own system at home for more than 4 years, actually. It's working perfect. And then so this seems to be very important. And then the much more important challenge we are facing, and then I'm working with another colleague on that, is to work on the phase out of charcoal and firewood cooking. And then that will reduce dramatically the air pollution, improve the health of the people. And then those are very critical and fundamental elements. And we have tried also to design and then to define 5 interrelated issues. The first one is the defining the sustainable, the energy pathway, the clean energy pathway for development in the continent. And that means to look at the present and to look at the future at the same time. The second area or exploration work we have defined is the efficient implementation, because you may have a perspective, and then if you do not have an efficient implementation, things will not move. And the third element is to look at the policy and governance aspect, because unless you have adequate policies, a strong governance system, things will not work as you like. And then obviously related to those 3 different elements is access to finance from the local, national, regional, at international level. And in connection to that also is technology, having access to technology that matters, or define the technology that is adequate to the local conditions. And as a cross-cutting element, and then it's skills and institutions. You need to build strong institutions in different countries. And then you need to offer skilled people, and then that means capacities that will bring together all those different elements.
That's an inspiring and deeply grounded vision, Professor Sokona. Your focus on access, equity, and practical implementations truly captures the spirit of science for humanities. You've also randomly joined the VinFuture's Innova Talk in June 2025, where you shared your insights on sustainable energy transitions. Reflecting on that experience, what moments or conversations stood out to you the most, both personally and in terms of what they meant for the wider scientific and policy community?
I must confess that I am a bit ignorant about VinFuture Foundation, because my first contact was through a friend and old colleague of mine, Dan Kahneman, with whom I start working back to more than 30 years. And he is the one who introduced me to VinFuture and then to take part to the webinar we had. And I found it very important, interesting, and I need to learn more about the foundation and then to see what kind of collaborative work it might be possible. And then beyond the foundation, and we need also to learn from Vietnam, because I have my first visit in Vietnam was back to the early 90s. From the early 90s, I went several times in Vietnam. I have seen dramatic change that happened in Vietnam. And then we want to learn how those changes happen in Vietnam. Because my first visit in Vietnam was to deliver a training program on energy planning. And actually, I need to learn more from Vietnam. And those are very important. And I see also a huge opportunity for VinFuture Foundation, and then to look at also different regions, and particularly the African region, and then to see what kind of collaboration and cooperation might be possible. And I went also to the website, and I see also that there is a prominent personalities, and then close of those prominent personalities, there is a need also to open to the rest of the world.
That's wonderful to hear, Professor Sokona. And it's inspiring that your first encounter with VinFuture came through long-standing collaborations and shared purpose. The way you speak about learning from Vietnam's transformations mirrors exactly what VinFuture hopes to foster: a global exchange of knowledge and progress driven by mutual respect. With that in mind, the VinFuture Prize has made it a priority to recognize and support innovators from underrepresented regions, including Africa. How do you think this vision can help open new doors for African researchers and innovators, and perhaps even reshape how the world views scientific excellence from the global south?
I think that it's important as VinFuture is looking at science and policy interface, and then to it's important maybe, and then to look at the opportunity of supporting evidence-based policy making, and then to also help bridging science and society. And on that perspective, and then to also help on more clearly looking at the equitable development part. And more importantly, then we are navigating all the time between the short term and pressing issues, and then with limited time to look at the long-term horizons, and then to look at, and then to also, it could be a broker of between different regions, a broker between different disciplines, a broker between different, as I said it, an honest broker, and then for a better life for the people in this planet. Because actually, what we are seeing across the world is a bit depressing, because there is all the combination of different crises that amplify each other. And then we have a tendency to forget, actually, currently, we have a tendency to forget also the pressing need of mobilizing people against climate. Because unless we deal with climate, there is limited hope of people, particularly the very vulnerable peoples. And I think that on that context, the foundation can help and can do a lot.
That's a beautiful note to reflect on, Professor Sokona. You've dedicated decades to advance knowledge, shaping policies, and mentoring future leaders across continents. Looking back over your remarkable career, what achievements are you most proud of? Not just in terms of research or policy impact, but in the lives you've touched along the way.
I think that there is some of the things I have contributed. It's related to widening a bit the scope of things matter in the IPCC and the government panel, and then to bring on board decisively the issue of development and the issue of sustainable development, and then the issue of equity and justice. And then I'm not the only one, with a number of colleagues, and then we contributed to that. And then this is, from my perspective, a good achievement. A good achievement also is that to get the attention of the policymakers, particularly in Africa, on climate issues. Because back to the 90s, they thought that climate was an issue of the global north, not the global south. And then actually, even the African head of the state and government have a committee on climate. And then this is, at the political level, a huge improvement. And more, I see also from artists, and then to the sociologists and others, more and more youth coming to me, and then they want to learn more on climate issues, and then they want also to particularly hear what they can do about it. So those are some encouraging lessons. One can be proud of it. But what we are facing actually, what the work ahead is huge. And so that this is a drop in the oceans, but I hope we'll have more drop in the ocean.
That's a beautiful thought, Professor Sokona. The way you describe each effort as a drop in the ocean reminds us that real progress is built through persistence and patience. If you could go back and give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would you tell him about the value of those small, steady drops and how they can one day create a wave of change?
I will tell them to have a conviction and then to have an agenda and they stick to their agenda. Disregarding what matters, and they have to stick to their agenda. And then because that require enduring effort, that require persistence. Those are the issues we are interested working on cannot be achieved overnight. And then we need also to convince many people to join the journey because it's a collective journey. Only we do it together, we'll be able to achieve something that is meaningful. Isolation will not help the problems. And then so that this is what the kind of advice or message I can convey to the younger generation. Because we fell to a large extent and then to achieve what we have in mind, the dream we had back to 92 at the summit. And I hope that the younger generation actually will learn from our mistakes and then to have a new impetus so that we have a better living condition to the majority of the people.
That's such a heartfelt reflection, Professor Sokona. Your words about convictions, persistence, and collective efforts truly resonate, especially for the next generations of change makers. As a final question, what message would you like to share with young African scientists and innovators and with the world about Africa's role in shaping more sustainable, equitable, and hopeful future for all?
Concentrate what matters to the people, particularly the people.
Thank you so much, Professor Sokona, for sharing your wisdom, your convictions, and your spirit with us today. Your words concentrate on what matters to the people, beautifully capture the essence of everything you've stood for throughout your remarkable career. From confronting the Sahel drought to shaping global climate policies, you've shown how persistence, collaborations, and compassion can slowly but steadily turn individual drops in the oceans into waves of lasting change. To our listeners, we hope today's conversation has reminded you that the true sustainability begin not only with technology, but with people, their dignity, their well-being, and their shared future on this planet. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and tune in to Unveil the Future on Spotify. You can also follow the VinFuture Foundations on our website and social media to stay updated on the VinFuture Prize, InnovaConnect, and other initiatives celebrating science for humanity. And a special reminder, the nomination portal for the 2026 VinFuture Prize season are now open and will remain so until April the 17th, 2026. If you know of a breakthrough that can change lives for the better, please visit our website or scan the QR code here to submit your nominations. I'm your host, Tiến Thành, and it's been an honor being your host today. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep learning, keep caring, and keep working together to unveil the future.